This is a continuation of The Status Civilization by Robert Sheckley, comprising chapters 25 through 27. Chapter 25. In the morning, the friendly oak tree dispensed breakfast and shaving equipment. Barent ate, washed and shaved, and set out for the nearest town. He had his objectives firmly in mind. He had to establish some sort of foolproof disguise, and he had to make contact with Earth's underground. When this was accomplished, he had to find out as much as he could about Earth's secret police, military dispositions, and the like. Group 2 had worked out a procedure for accomplishing these objectives. As Barent came to the outskirts of a town, he hoped that the group's methods would work. So far, the Earth he was on had very little resemblance to the Earth which the group had reconstructed. He walked down interminable streets lined with small white cottages. At first, he thought every house looked the same. Then he realized that each had one or two small architectural differences. But instead of distinguishing the houses, these niggling differences simply served to point up the monotonous similarities. There were hundreds of these cottages, stretching as far as he could see, each of them set upon a little plot of carefully tended grass. Their genteel sameness depressed him. Unexpectedly, he missed the ridiculous, clumsy, makeshift individuality of Omegan buildings. He reached a shopping center. The stores repeated the pattern set by the houses. They were low, discreet, and very similar. Only a close inspection of window displays revealed differences between a food store and a sports shop. He passed a small building with a sign that read, "Robot Confessional. Open 24 hours a day." It seemed to be some sort of church. The procedure set by Group 2 for locating the underground on Earth was simple and straightforward. Revolutionaries, he had been told, are found in greatest quantity among a civilization's most depressed elements. Poverty breeds dissatisfaction. The have-nots want to take from those who have. Therefore, the logical place to look for subversion is in the slums. It was a good theory. The trouble was, Barent couldn't find any slums. He walked for hours, past neat stores and pleasant little homes, playgrounds and parks, scrupulously tended farms, and then past more houses and stores. Nothing looked much better or worse than anything else. By evening, he was tired and footsore. As far as he could tell, he had discovered nothing of significance. Before he could penetrate any deeper into the complexities of Earth, he would have to question the local citizens. It was a dangerous step, but one which he could not avoid. He stood near a clothing store in the gathering dusk and decided upon a course of action. He would pose as a foreigner, a man newly arrived in North America from Asia or Europe. In that way, he should be able to ask questions with a measure of safety. A man was walking toward him, a plump, ordinary-looking fellow in a brown business tunic. Barent stopped him. "I beg your pardon," he said. "I'm a stranger here, just arrived from Rome." "Really?" the man said. "Yes. I'm afraid I don't understand things over here very well," Barent said with an apologetic little laugh. "I can't seem to find any cheap hotels. If you could direct me—" "Citizen, do you feel all right?" the man asked, his face hardening. "As I said, I'm a foreigner, and I'm looking—" "Now look," the man said. "You know as well as I do that there aren't any outlanders anymore." "There aren't?" "Of course not. I've been in Rome. It's just like here in Wilmington. Same sort of houses and stores. No one's an outlander anymore." Barent couldn't think of anything to say. He smiled nervously. "Furthermore," the man said, "there are no cheap lodgings anywhere on Earth. Why should there be? Who would stay in them?" "Who indeed?" Barent said. "I guess I've had a little too much to drink." "No one drinks any more," the man said. "I don't understand. What sort of a game is this?" "What sort of a game do you think it is?" Barent asked, falling back on a technique which the group had recommended. The man stared at him, frowning. "I think I get it," he said. "You must be an opinioner." Barent said, noncommittally. "Sure, that's it," the man said. "You're one of those citizens goes around asking people's opinions, for surveys and that sort of thing. Right?" "You've made a very intelligent guess," Barent said. "Well, I don't suppose it was too hard. Opinioners are always walking around trying to get people's attitudes on things. I would have spotted you right away if you'd been wearing opinioner's clothing." The man started to frown again. "How come you aren't dressed like an opinioner?" I just graduated, Barrett said. Haven't had a chance to get the clothes. Oh. Well, you should get the proper wear, the man said sententiously. How can a citizen tell your status? Just a test sampling, Barrett said. Thank you for your cooperation, sir. Perhaps I'll have a chance to interview you again in the near future. Anytime, the man said. He nodded politely and walked off. Barrett thought about it and decided that the occupation of opinioner was perfect for him. It would give him the all-important right to ask questions, to meet people, to find out how Earth lived. He would have to be careful, of course, not to reveal his ignorance. But working with circumspection, he should have a general knowledge of this civilization in a few days. First, he would have to buy opinioner's clothing. That seemed to be important. The trouble was, he had no money with which to pay for it. The group had been unable to duplicate Earth money. They couldn't even remember what it looked like. But they had provided him with a means of overcoming even that obstacle. Barrett turned and went into the nearest costumers. The proprietor was a short man with china blue eyes and a salesman's ready smile. He welcomed Barrett and asked how he could be of service. I need opinioner's clothing, Barrett told him. I've just graduated. Of course, sir, the owner said, and you've come to the right place for it. Most of the smaller stores don't carry the clothing for anything but the more, common professions. But here at Jules Wonderson's, we have ready wares for all of the 520 major professions listed in the Civil Status Almanac. I am Jules Wonderson. A pleasure, Barrett said. Have you a ready wear in my size? I'm sure I have, Wonderson said. Would you care for a regular or a special? A regular will do nicely. Most new opinioners prefer the special, Wonderson said. The little extra simulated handmade touches increase the public's respect. In that case, I'll take the special. Yes, sir. Though, if you could wait a day or two. We will be having in a new fabric. A simulated home loom, complete with natural weaving mistakes. For the man of status discrimination. A real prestige item. Perhaps I'll come back for that, Barrett said. Right now I need a ready wear. Of course, sir, Wonderson said, disappointed but hiding it bravely. If you'll wait just one little minute. After several fittings, Barrett found himself wearing a black business suit with a thin edge of white piping around the lapels. To his inexperienced eye, it looked almost exactly like the other suits Wonderson had on display for bankers, stockbrokers, grocers, accountants, and the like. But for Wonderson, who talked about the banker's lapel and the insurance agent's drape, the differences were as clear as the gross status symbols of Omega. Barrett decided it was just a question of training. There, sir, Wonderson said. A perfect fit and a fabric guaranteed for a lifetime. All for $39.95. Excellent, Barrett said. Now, about the money. Yes, sir? Barrett took the plunge. I haven't any. You haven't, sir? That's quite unusual. Yes, it is, Barrett said. However, I do have certain articles of value. From his pocket, he took 3 diamond rings with which the group on Omega had supplied him. These stones are genuine diamonds, as any jeweler will be glad to attest. If you would take one of them until I have the money for payment. But, sir, Wonderson said, diamonds and such have no intrinsic value. They haven't since 2023, when von Blon wrote the definitive work destroying the concept of scarcity value. Of course, Barrett said, at a loss for words. Wonderson looked at the rings. I suppose these have a sentimental value, though. Certainly. We've had them in the family for generations. In that case, Wonderson said, I wouldn't want to deprive you of them. Please, no arguments, sir. Sentiment is the most priceless of emotions. I couldn't sleep nights if I took even one of these family heirlooms from you. But there's the matter of payment. Pay me at your leisure. You mean you'll trust me, even though you don't know me? Most certainly, Wonderson said. He smiled archly. Trying out your opinioner's methods, aren't you? Well, even a child knows that our civilization is based upon trust, not collateral. It is axiomatic that even a stranger is to be trusted until he has conclusively and unmistakably proven otherwise. Haven't you ever been cheated? Of course not. Crime is non-existent these days. In that case, Barrett asked, what about Omega? I beg your pardon? Omega, the prison planet. You must have heard of it. I think I have, Wonderson said cautiously. Well, I should have said that crime is almost non-existent. I suppose there will always be a few congenital criminal types, easily recognizable as such. But I'm told they don't amount to more than 10 or 12 individuals a year out of a population of nearly 2 billion. He smiled broadly. My chances of meeting one are exceedingly rare. Barrett thought about the prison ships constantly shuttling back and forth between Earth and Omega, dumping their human cargo and returning for more. He wondered where Wonderson got his statistics. For that matter, he wondered where the police were. He had seen no military uniform since leaving the starship. He would have liked to ask about it, but it seemed wiser to discontinue that line of questioning. Thank you very much for the credit, Barrett said. I'll be back with the payment as soon as possible. Of course you will, Wonderson said, warmly shaking Barrett's hand. Take your time, sir. No rush at all. Barrett thanked him again and left the store. He had a profession now. And if other people believed as Wonderson did, he had unlimited credit. He was on a planet that seemed at first glance to be a utopia. The utopia presented certain contradictions, of course. He hoped to find out more about them over the next few days. Down the block, Barrett found a hotel called the Bide a Bit. He engaged a room for the week, on credit. Chapter 26. In the morning, Barrett asked directions to the nearest branch of the public library. He decided that he needed as much background out of books as he could get. With a knowledge of the history and development of Earth civilization, he would have a better idea of what to expect and what to watch out for. His opinioner's clothing allowed him access to the closed shelves where the history books were kept, but the books themselves were disappointing. Most of them were Earth's ancient history, from earliest beginnings to the dawn of atomic power. Barrett skimmed through them. As he read, some memories of prior reading returned to him. He was able to jump quickly from Periclean Greece to Imperial Rome, to Charlemagne and the Dark Ages, from the Norman Conquest to the 30 Years' War, and then to a rapid survey of the Napoleonic era. He read with more care about the world wars. The book ended with the explosion of the first atom bombs. The other books on the shelf were simply amplifications of various stages of history he had found in the first book. After a great deal of searching, Barrett found a small work entitled The Post-War Dilemma, Volume 1, by Arthur Whitler. It began where the other histories had left off, with the atomic bombs exploding over Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Barrett sat down and began to read carefully. He learned about the Cold War of the 1950s, when several nations were in possession of atomic and hydrogen weapons. Already, the author stated, the seeds of a massive and stultifying conformity were present in the nations of the world. In America, there was the frenzied resistance to communism. In Russia and China, there was the frenzied resistance to capitalism. One by one, all the nations of the world were drawn into one camp or the other. For purposes of internal security, all countries relied upon the newest propaganda and indoctrination techniques. All countries felt they needed, for survival's sake, a rigid adherence to state-approved doctrines. The pressure upon the individual to conform became both stronger and subtler. The dangers of war passed. The many societies of Earth began to merge into a single superstate. But the pressure to conform, instead of lessening, grew more intense. The need was dictated by the continued explosive increase in population and the many problems of unification across national and ethnic lines. Differences in opinion could be deadly. Too many groups now had access to the supremely deadly hydrogen bombs. Under the circumstances, deviant behavior could not be tolerated. Unification was finally completed. The conquest of space went on, from moonship to planet ship to starship. But Earth became increasingly rigid in its institutions. A civilization more inflexible than anything produced by medieval Europe punished any opposition to existing customs, habits, beliefs. These breaches of the social contract were considered major crimes, as serious as murder or arson. They were punished similarly. The antique institutions of secret police, political police, informers, all were used. Every possible device was brought to bear toward the all-important goal of conformity. For the nonconformists, there was Omega. Capital punishment had been banished long before, but there was neither room nor resources to take the growing number of criminals who crammed prisons everywhere. the world leaders finally decided to transport these criminals to a separate prison world, copying a system which the French had used in Guyana and New Caledonia, and the British had used in Australia and early North America. Since it was impossible to rule Omega from Earth, the authorities didn't try. They simply made sure that none of the prisoners escaped. That was the end of Volume 1. A note at the end said that Volume 2 was to be a study of contemporary Earth. It was entitled The Status Civilization. The second volume was not on the shelves. Berendt asked the librarian, and was told that it had been destroyed in the interests of public safety. Berendt left the library and went to a little park. He sat and stared at the ground and tried to think. He had expected to find an Earth similar to the one described in Whitler's book. He had been prepared for a police state, tight security controls, a repressed populace, and a growing air of unrest. But that apparently was the past. So far he hadn't even seen a policeman. He had observed no security controls, and the people he had met did not seem harshly repressed. Quite the contrary. This seemed like a completely different world. Except that year after year, the ships came to Omega with their cargoes of brainwashed prisoners. Who arrested them? Who judged them? What sort of a society produced them? He would have to find out the answers himself. Chapter 27. Early the next morning, Berendt began his exploration. His technique was simple. He rang doorbells and asked questions. He warned all his subjects that his real questions might be interspersed with tricks or nonsense questions, whose purpose was to test the general awareness level. In that way, Berendt found he could ask anything at all about Earth, could explore controversial or even non-existent areas, and do so without revealing his own ignorance. And there was still the danger that some official would ask for his credentials, or that the police would mysteriously spring up when least expected. But he had to take those risks. Starting at the beginning of Orange Esplanade, Berendt worked his way northward, calling at each house as he went. His results were uneven, as a selective sampling of his work shows. Citizen A. L. Gothride, age 55, occupation home tender. A strong, erect woman, imperious but polite, with a no-nonsense air about her. You want to ask me about class and status? Is that it? Yes, ma'am. You opinioners are always asking about class and status. One would think you'd know all about it by now. But very well. Today, since everyone is equal, there is only one class, the middle class. The only question then is, to what portion of the middle class does one belong? High, low, or middle? And how is that determined? Why, by all sorts of things. The way a person speaks, eats, dresses, the way he acts in public, his manners, his clothing. You can always tell your upper middle class man by his clothes. It's quite unmistakable. I see. And the lower middle classes? Well, for one thing, they lack creative energy. They wear ready-made clothing, for example, without taking the trouble to improve upon it. The same goes for their homes. Mere uninspired adornment won't do, let me add. That's simply the mark of the nouveau upper middle class. One doesn't receive such persons in the home. Thank you, Citizen Gothride. And where would you classify yourself status-wise? With the very faintest hesitation. Oh, I've never thought much about it. Upper middle, I suppose. Citizen Dreister, age 43, occupation shoe vendor. A slender, mild man, young-looking for his years. Yes, sir. Myra and I have 3 children of school age, all boys. Could you give me some idea what their education consists of? They learn how to read and write, and how to become good citizens. They're already starting to learn their trades. The oldest is going into the family business, shoes. The other 2 are taking apprenticeship courses in groceries and retail marketing. That's my wife's family's business. They also learn how to retain status and how to utilize standard techniques for moving upward. That's about what goes on in the open classes. Are there other school classes which are not open? Well, naturally, there are the closed classes. Every child attends them. And what do they learn in the closed classes? I don't know. They're closed, as I said. Don't the children ever speak about those classes? Number. They talk about everything under the sun, but not about that. Haven't you any idea what goes on in the closed classes? Sorry, I don't. At a guess, and it's only a guess, mind you. I'd say it's probably something religious. But you'd have to ask a teacher for that. Thank you, sir. And how do you classify yourself status-wise? Middle class. Not much doubt about that. Citizen Mary Jane Morgan, age 51, occupation school teacher. A tall, bony woman. Yes, sir. I think that just about sums up our curriculum at the Little Beige Schoolhouse. Except for the closed classes. I beg your pardon, sir? The closed classes. You haven't discussed those. I'm afraid I can't. Why not, Citizen Morgan? Is this a trick question? Everyone knows that teachers aren't allowed in the closed classes. Who is allowed in? The children, of course. But who teaches them? The government is in charge of that. Of course. But who, specifically, does the teaching in the closed classes? I have no idea, sir. It's none of my business. The closed classes are an ancient and respected institution. What goes on in them is quite possibly of a religious nature. But that's only a guess. Whatever it is, it's none of my business. Nor is it yours, young man, opinioner or not. Thank you, Citizen Morgan. Citizen Edgar Neef, age 107, occupation retired officer. A tall, stooped man with cane, icy blue eyes undimmed by age. A little louder, please. What was that question again? About the armed forces. Specifically, I asked... I remember now. Yes, young man. I was a colonel in the 21st North American Spaceborne Commando, which was a regular unit of the Earth Defense Corps. And did you retire from the service? No, the service retired from me. I beg pardon, sir? You heard me correctly, young man. It happened just 63 years ago. The Earth Armed Forces were demobilized, except for the police whom I cannot count. But all regular units were demobilized. Why was that done, sir? There wasn't anyone to fight. Wasn't even anyone to guard against, or so I was told. Damned foolish business, I say. Why, sir? Because an old soldier knows that you can never tell when an enemy might spring up. It could happen now. And then where would we be? Couldn't the armies be formed again? Certainly. But the present generation has no concept of serving under arms. There are no leaders left outside of a few useless old fools like me. It would take years for an effective force, effectively led, to be formed. And in the meantime, Earth is completely open to invasion from the outside? Yes, except for the police units, and I seriously doubt their reliability under fire. Could you tell me about the police? There's nothing I know about them. I have never bothered my head about non-military matters. But it is conceivable that the police have now taken over the functions of the army, isn't it? That the police constitute a sizable and disciplined paramilitary force? It is possible, sir. Anything is possible. Citizen Morton Honners, age 31, occupation verbalizer. A slim, languid man with an earnest, boyish face and smooth, corn-blonde hair. You are a verbalizer, Citizen Honners? I am, sir. Though perhaps author would be a better word if you don't mind. Of course. Citizen Honners, are you presently engaged in writing for any of the periodicals I see on the dissemination stands? Certainly not. These are written by incompetent hacks for the dubious delectation of the lower middle class. The stories, in case you didn't know, are taken line by line from the works of various popular writers of the 20th and 21st centuries. The people who do the work merely substitute adjectives and adverbs. Occasionally, I'm told, a more daring hack will substitute a verb, or even a noun. But that is rare. The editors of such periodicals frown upon sweeping innovations. And you are not engaged in such work? Absolutely not. My work is non-commercial. I am a creative Conrad specialist. Would you mind telling me what that means, Citizen Honners? I'd be happy to. My own particular field of endeavor lies in recreating the works of Joseph Conrad, an author who lived in the pre-atomic era. How do you go about recreating those works, sir? Well, at present I'm engaged in my 5th recreation of Lord Jim. To do it, I steep myself as thoroughly as possible in the original work. Then I set about rewriting it as Conrad would have written it if he had lived today. It is a labor which calls for extreme diligence, and for the utmost in artistic integrity. A single slip could mar the recreation. As you can see, it calls for a preliminary mastery of Conrad's vocabulary, themes, plots, characters, mood, approach, and so on. All this goes in, and yet the book cannot be a slavish repeat. It must have something new to say, just as Conrad would have said it. And have you succeeded? The critics have been generous, and my publisher gives me every encouragement. When you have finished your 5th recreation of Lord Jim, what do you plan to do? First, I shall take a long rest. Then I shall recreate one of Conrad's minor works. The Planter of Malata, perhaps. I see. Is recreation the rule in all the arts? It is the goal of the true aspiring artist, no matter what medium he has chosen to work in. Art is a cruel mistress, I fear. Citizen Willis Owerka, age 8, occupation student. A cheerful, black-haired, sun-tanned boy. I'm sorry, Mr. Opinioner. My parents aren't home right now. That's perfectly all right, Willis. Do you mind if I ask you a question or two? I don't mind. What's that you got under your jacket, mister? It bulges. I'll ask the questions, Willis, if you don't mind. Now, do you like school? It's all right. What courses do you take? Well, there's reading and writing and status appreciation, and courses in art, music, architecture, literature, ballet, and theater. The usual stuff. I see. That's in the open classes? Sure. Do you also attend a closed class? Sure I do, every day. Do you mind talking about it? I don't mind. Is that bulge a gun? I know what guns are. Some of the big boys were passing around pictures at lunchtime a couple days ago and I peeked. Is it a gun? My suit doesn't fit very well, that's all. Now then. Would you mind telling me what you do in the closed class? I don't mind. What happens then? I don't remember. Come now, Willis. Really, Mr. Opinioner. We all go into this classroom, and we come out 2 hours later for recess. But that's all. I can't remember anything else. I've talked with the other kids. They can't remember either. Strange? No, sir. If we were supposed to remember, it wouldn't be closed. Perhaps so. Do you remember what the room looks like, or who your teacher is for the closed class? No, sir. I really don't remember anything at all about it. Thank you. Willis. Citizen Cucullin Dent, age 37, occupation inventor. A prematurely bald man with ironic, heavy-lidded eyes. Yep, that's right. I'm an inventor specializing in games. I brought out Triangulate, or Else, last year. It's been pretty popular. Have you seen it? I'm afraid not. Sort of a cute game. It's a simulated lost-in-space thing. The players are given incomplete data for their miniature computers, additional information as they win it, space hazards for penalties, lots of flashing lights and stuff like that. Very big seller. Do you invent anything else, Citizen Dent? When I was a kid, I worked up an improved cedar harvester, designed to be approximately 3 times as efficient as the present models. And would you believe it? I really thought I had a chance of selling it. Did you sell it? Of course not. At that time, I didn't realize that the patent office was closed permanently except for the games section. Were you angry about that? A little angry at the time, but I soon realized that the models we have are plenty good enough. There's no need for more efficient or more ingenious inventions. Folks today are satisfied with what they've got. Besides, new inventions would be of no service to mankind. Earth's birth and death rate are stable, and there's enough for everyone. To produce a new invention, you'd have to retool an entire factory. That would be almost impossible since all the factories today are automatic and self-repairing. That's why there's a moratorium on invention, except in the novelty game field. How do you feel about it? What's there to feel? That's how things are. Would you like to have things different? Maybe. But being an inventor, I'm classified as a potentially unstable character anyhow. Citizen Barn Threnton, age 41, occupation atomics engineer specializing in spacecraft design, a nervous, intelligent-looking man with sad brown eyes. You want to know what I do in my job? I'm sorry you asked that, citizen, because I don't do a thing except walk around the factory. Union rules require 1 standby human for every robot or robotized operation. That's what I do. I just stand by. You sound dissatisfied, Citizen Threnton? I am. I wanted to be an atomics engineer. I trained for it. Then when I graduated, I found out my knowledge was 50 years out of date. Even if I learned what was going on now, I'd have no place to use it. Why not? Because everything in atomics is automatized. I don't know if the majority of the population knows that, but it's true. From raw material to finished product, it's all completely automatic. The only human participation in the program is quantity control in terms of population indexes, and even that is minimal. What happens if a part of an automatic factory breaks down? It gets fixed by robot repair units. And if they break down, the damned things are self-repairing. All I can do is stand by and watch and fill out a report, which is a ridiculous position for a man who considers himself an engineer. Why don't you turn to some other field? No use. I've checked, and the rest of the engineers are in the same position I'm in, watching automatic processes which they don't understand. Name your field: food processing, automobile manufacture, construction, biochem. It's all the same. Either standby engineers or no engineers at all. This is true for spaceflight also? Sure. No member of the Space Pilots Union has been off Earth for close to 50 years. They wouldn't know how to operate a ship. I see. All the ships are set for automatic. Exactly. Permanently and irrevocably automatic. What would happen if these ships ran into an unprecedented situation? That's hard to say. The ships can't think, you know. They simply follow preset programs. If the ships ran into a situation for which they were not programmed, they'd be paralyzed, at least temporarily. I think they have an optimum choice selector which is supposed to take over unstructured situations, but it's never been tried out. At best, it would react sluggishly. At worst, it wouldn't work at all, and that would be fine by me. Do you really mean that? I certainly do. I'm sick of standing around watching a machine do the same thing day after day. Most of the professional men I know feel the same way. We want to do something. Anything. Did you know that 100 years ago human-piloted starships were exploring the planets of other solar systems? Yes. Well, that's what we should be doing now. Moving outward, exploring, advancing. That's what we need. I agree. But don't you think you're saying rather dangerous things? I know I am. But frankly, I just don't care any longer. Let them ship me to Omega if they want to. I'm doing no good here. Then you've heard about Omega? Anyone connected with starships knows about Omega. Round trips between Omega and Earth. That's all our ships do. It's a terrible world. Personally, I put the blame on the clergy. The clergy? Absolutely. Those sanctimonious fools with their endless drivel about the Church of the Spirit of Mankind Incarnate. It's enough to make a man wish for a little evil. Citizen Father Boren, age 51, occupation clergyman. A stately, plum-shaped man wearing a saffron robe and white sandals. That's right, my son. I am the abbot of the local branch of the Church of the Spirit of Mankind Incarnate. Our church is the official and exclusive religious expression of the government of Earth. Our religion speaks for all the peoples of Earth. It is a composite of the best elements of all the former religions, both major and minor, skillfully blended into a single all-embracing faith. Citizen Abbot, aren't there bound to be contradictions in doctrine among the various religions which make up your faith? There were. But the forgers of our present church threw out all controversial matter. We wanted agreement, not dissension. We preserve only certain colorful facets of those early great religions, facets with which people can identify. There have never been any schisms in our religion, because we are all acceptant. One may believe anything one wishes, as long as it preserves the Holy Spirit of mankind incarnate. For our worship, you see, is the true worship of man, and the spirit we recognize is the spirit of the divine and holy good. Would you define good for me, Citizen Abbot? Certainly. Good is that force within us which inspires men to acts of conformity and subservience. The worship of good is essentially the worship of oneself, and therefore the only true worship. The self which one worships is the ideal social being, the man content in his niche in society, yet ready to creatively advance his status. Good is gentle, since it is a true reflection of the loving and pitying universe. Good is continually changing in its aspects, although it comes to us in the— You have a strange look on your face, young man. I'm sorry, Citizen Abbott. I believe I heard that sermon, or one very much like it. It is true wherever one hears it. Of course. One more question, sir. Could you tell me about the religious instruction of children? That duty is performed for us by the robot confessors. Yes? The notion came to us from the ancient root faith of transcendental Freudianism. The robot confessor instructs children and adults alike. It hears their problems within the social matrix. It is their constant friend, their social mentor, their religious instructor. Being robotic, the confessors are able to give exact and unvarying answers to any question. This aids the great work of conformity. I can see that it does. What do the human priests do? They watch over the robot confessors. Are these robot confessors present in the closed classrooms? I am not competent to answer that. They are, aren't they? I truly do not know. The closed classrooms are closed to abbots as well as other adults. By whose order? By order of the chief of the secret police. I see. Thank you, Citizen Abbott Boren. Citizen Enyon Dravivian, age 43, occupation government employee. A narrow-faced, slit-eyed man, old and tired beyond his years. Good afternoon, sir. You say that you are employed by the government? Correct. Is that the state or the federal government? Both. I see. And have you been in this employ for very long? Approximately 18 years. Yes, sir. Would you mind telling me what, specifically, your job is? Not at all. I am the chief of the secret police. You are— I see, sir. That's very interesting. Don't reach for your needle beam, ex-Citizen Barrett. I can assure you, it won't operate in the blanketed area around this house, and if you draw it, you'll be hurt. How? I have my own means of protection. How did you know my name? I've known about you almost since you set foot upon Earth. We are not entirely without resources, you know, but we can discuss all that inside. Won't you come in? I think I'd rather not. I'm afraid you have to. Come, Barrett, I won't bite you. Am I under arrest? Of course not. We're simply going to have a little talk. That's right, sir, right through there. Just make yourself comfortable. This concludes the 7th part of 8 total of The Status Civilization by Robert Sheckley, produced by Best Audiobooks for free.